By the host or participant. The account owner can also watch this recording.
All righty.
All right, Julian, whenever you're ready.
Ready to go? Okay, hang on. Let me just bring up my notes here. All right. Good evening, everybody. Greetings and welcome to the CQ Blind Hams Tech Zoom. This is the off-air version of discussions of topics that are of interest to the blind amateur radio community, and of course, with the blindness perspective. So we meet every month, second Thursday of the month, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So for those who are here and don't know, these meetings are recorded and they become the next CQ Blind Hams podcast. So be aware that when you're speaking, if for whatever reason you're not comfortable being on CQ Blind Hams podcast, well, then I guess you want to stay muted for the duration. But we hope you don't, because we love to hear from everybody. So welcome. You may be confronted with a pop-up that says that the meeting is being recorded. You have to hit got it to be able to access your meeting controls. Otherwise, that pop-up is going to stay on your screen and then you will not be able to unmute yourself and participate. So anybody at this point who is not presenting or is not a co-host here, we ask you to stay muted and remain so until the times of the meeting that we open it up for comments and questions and the like. And please wait to be acknowledged before speaking. We don't want to try to talk over each other or get like sometimes we get on Blind Hams, which makes it hard to copy. So let's try to just be polite and not step over each other, and things will go a lot smoother. So without further ado, here for October's Tech Zoom, we're going to go and introduce our normal co-hosts and crew. Joel, W0CAS, what's happening?
Welcome everybody to the, this is a little bit off topic for us, but the meeting tonight is going to be about a weather station, which is not actually ham related, but the most talked about topic in amateur radio is what? The weather. So this is one of the reasons we brought this topic to the meeting tonight. Back to you, Julian.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I beg to differ. What's one of the first questions that's usually asked, especially when making long distance contacts? What is the weather? So I would say this is absolutely related to ham radio because it relates to one of the most asked about topics. Robert, NC5R, are you with us? What's happening in Texas?
Oh boy, there's a lot happening in Texas. We're getting ready to temporarily move out of our house, and I wish I had a weather station because never sure if the coast is clear around here with all these boxes. Back to you, Julian. Good evening, everybody.
Well, I somehow don't think the Tempest weather station has that capability yet, but hey, we could always make suggestions to the developers. Steve, WB2KTV, what's happening in old New York?
Not too much, just hanging out. Weather is always a concern in the amateur radio business. Some of us like terrestrial weather, and some of us like space weather, but you can't live with it, and you can't live without it.
Absolutely true, especially the sun and the sunspots and the cycles and all that. So it is all interconnected, that is for sure. And then we've got Angelo back there somewhere playing with the keyboard and keeping things running in the background. Care to say anything? And if not, we'll just say thank you as always for doing what you do in the background and keeping this thing going. And last but not least, myself, Julian Vargas, N1CA from Southern California, where the weather is quite nice today. I think we only got up to the lower 80s today, if that, and lows in the 60s. So we're absolutely having stellar weather down here. And I am a weather enthusiast, so I always love when this topic or any form of it comes up for discussion. So I will certainly be listening with a lot of interest. And just a brief mention here for anybody who's been living under a rock and hasn't heard yet, there's an app for the iPhone called Repeater Phone, and it allows you to connect to All-Star, very similar to what DV Switch Mobile provided on Android. Now we have it on iOS, and we have the ability to connect to the All-Star network without necessarily having to have a physical node. We can connect via the web transceive mode. I'm sure someday it'll probably be up for discussion as one of our meeting topics, but just thought I'd put it out there. If you heard some of us talking about it on the air, beta testing it and such, this app is now available and it works quite well. It's a really neat app. So the real topic for tonight's meeting, as Joel said, the Tempest weather station. Very cool and powerful little weather station. I hear Mark and some of these guys talk about it, and I'm just utterly jealous. Wish I could set something like that up where I live, but alas, I can't. But I get to enjoy it vicariously through the reports that are generated by that station and mentioned on the air. So our guest speaker for tonight, Alan, KF0FUL, is going to talk to us about all the capabilities of this wonderful station. And then Mark, WB6BJN, is going to talk to us about this weather station, how he as a blind person set it up and how accessible it is. So without further ado, Alan, are you with us?
I'm with you. Thank you for the great intro, Julian. Before we get started here, I would like to remind everyone, as Julian said earlier, let's try and hold the questions to the very end here. I've got a fair amount of material to get through, and the real key point of this is to get to the point to where Mark can sort of share what his experiences are in the setup and the use of this for accessibility. Before we get going, though, how did we get here? Why am I here talking to you guys? Really, I think it was back in July. I tend to walk around each morning before I go to work or before I get my work started, and I listen to the various repeaters around town. We've got a repeater, a VFW repeater that's hooked up to the to an All-Star node, Blind Ham's All-Star node. And I heard a conversation going on, and Mark and a number of others were talking about weather stations. Mark was getting ready to purchase a weather station, and he was pretty excited about this. And I said I chimed in, and I'd normally just listen. I don't get involved, but I said, hey, why don't you look at this Tempest weather station? I've had one for a couple of years. I think it's really great. I think it may have some accessible features for you. And that's where this whole thing started. Mark ended up purchasing one, and then several others. And then I think that at last count, at least 10 of the folks on Blind Hams have purchased one. And in fact, one person here where I live in Wichita, Kansas, overheard some of these conversations over the air, and he purchased one. And that guy told me about a month ago that he had bought one just based on his listening to all of the discussion. So it's really been interesting. You know, we talk now. I've you know, been on for a few months and talking to the various folks. Wonderful group of people you all are, and it's just kind of been fun. I've been getting a lot of questions about the Tempest since I've had one for a few years, and I was asked last week, could I give a talk on it? And I said, well, absolutely I can. And so that has what has brought me here to you all tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my video for the people who can see me, and I'm going to share my presentation, and we'll get rolling here. We're going to keep this pretty informal. Let's see, let me share my screen, and there we go. Okay, and I'm showing on my monitor that I'm sharing there. Okay, so we'll keep it informal. I'll run through everything. I've got some examples. I'm going to try my best to describe what I'm showing in some of these slides. Most of them are textual, but I do have some visual aids in here, and I'm going to try and describe them the best we can. And then we're going to let Mark kind of give his perspective towards the end here. Okay, so let's start this thing off here. But first we'll talk about my probably my favorite topic. Me. Who is KF0FUL? A little bit about me personally and professionally. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, now living in Wichita, Kansas. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University back in the mid-1980s. I've been a commercial pilot for 39 years and worked in the the flight test industry for over 35 years at a number of companies. Presently, I am a flight test engineer at Bombardier Flight Test Center here in Wichita, Kansas, and I've been located here for 27 years. And for people who have never heard of Bombardier as an aircraft manufacturer, they own a little company you might have heard of called Learjet, and that is where I've worked for the past 27 years. My work involves aircraft development and certification flight tests over my career, I've done many different military and civilian aircraft models. Not going to go into them for the sighted folks. I've got a list of many of them on here, but suffice it to say, I've worked on a lot of different programs. 35 years, you get to work on lots of different things. Amateur radio wise, so what makes me worthy of talking to all of you? Well, I started working on my novice license back in the late 1970s, but then at some point I got started also working on my pilot's license. And I figured out pretty quickly that I could get just about enough radio by flying aircraft, and that satisfied me, at least temporarily. So I put the novice license on hold at that time. Over 40 years later, I became interested again in ham radio. What caused it was last year, 2021, I purchased one of these RTL SDR dongles for about $35. Started listening to some VHF and some HF broadcasts, built myself an antenna, and lo and behold, I was hooked again. So took my technician practice test to see what that was all about, and I passed the test on the first try without looking at any of the material. 2 weeks later, I was a technician licensed, and 4 months after that, I had my general, and then a week after that, my amateur extra. And I, as an engineer and a technology enthusiast, I tend to dive into things. So that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half. Absolutely loved it, love it all, and that's a whole other topic. So that's just a little bit of background about me. Okay, one more note before we continue. I do not work for WeatherFlow, which is the maker of the Tempest, and I did purchase my weather station with my own money. I just want to get that out of there. I'm not trying, this is not an advertisement. I'm just an enthusiast of this particular device. Okay, so let's see. What are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about the WeatherFlow Tempest weather station, what it is, what it isn't, what does it cost, what makes this station so popular. We'll take a look at the hardware, the setup, and different ways of accessing the data. So we'll look at the Tempest website and the Android and iOS applications for the weather station. And then we'll look at a few other options for accessing the data. There's something that's called PyConsole that you can use to set up a dedicated console type display if that's what you choose to do. Another application called WeWeather is a database for storing and manipulating the weather data. And WeWeather, by the way, actually can be used with a number of different weather stations, not just the Tempest. And then there's another one. There's a web page called Weather34 that a gentleman, I believe he's in the UK, developed. There's a number of people that have worked on it, and that allows you to display data out of the WeWeather database in a much more refined way. All of that data that's captured by the WeWeather database, if you choose to use that. Finally, we'll talk about the accessibility options, how to purchase the device, and help and resources that you can get if you want to deep dive further on down, or if you have purchased one, some great areas for help and resources on some of these items that we talked about. And then finally, and probably the most important portion of the talk tonight, this will be Mark, WB6BJN. He's going to give us a chat about what it was like for him to do the installation, and then the accessibility experience and how he's been using that device every day. I think you'll find it quite eye-opening. And then we'll have Q&A at the very end. Moving on. Okay, so let's start off with the Tempest. What it is. Well, the Tempest is what I would call a prosumer internet connected weather station with many of the features that you would find in a professional weather station, like the Davis Vantage Pro 2. And that probably is the quintessential sort of prosumer device that's out there that a lot of people purchase. The difference here, though, is the Tempest is much cheaper. It's easier to set up. It's easier to use. The historical data from the Tempest is stored on WeatherFlow's data server for access anytime. Station data can be made accessible to other weather sites like Weather Underground, for instance, as well as others. So it has a lot of prosumer features. What the weather station is, and it is not a professional weather station. It also does not include a companion display unit, which a lot of the professional stations do. But there are options. If you want a dedicated display unit, there's some options for those who would like a dedicated display, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. What does it cost? Well, as of October 2022, it costs $329. There is, I believe right now, for anybody interested, there is a coupon code out there that is available. I don't know how long it is, but as of last week, there was a coupon code that you could choose, and I think it was 10% off. Moving on. Okay. Well, what is it that makes this station so popular? Well, when you look at the price compared to other stations offering similar features, the Davis Vantage Pro 2, for instance, if you wanted to deck it out to where you could both capture the data and then put it out on the internet, you're probably looking at $800, $1,000, maybe more by the time you buy all the connectivity. Secondly, ease of setup and use. It's just very easy to use, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Mark a little bit later, just how easy this device is to set up and use. Another great selling point is this device, unlike a lot of the other weather stations you might have seen or heard about, has an ultrasonic wind sensor with no moving parts to wear out. So that's kind of a nice feature. The data off of it can be accessed from any web browser with an internet connection, and you can get detailed time history plots of each parameter that it records and a history as well. Also, Android and iOS applications are available that run on your phone. They run on an iPad, a tablet, what have you. They're really good apps. And it's probably worth it to mention at this point that the applications that you can use with this system, if you choose to access the data from a web browser, you get the almost identical experience with the, maybe with the exception of being able to set things up. But all of the data pages, all of the time history plots, all of that are available to you in exactly the same format as well on a web browser, any web browser that's internet connected. And then accessibility features make this an excellent choice for the visually impaired. Also, there's a lot of open source options for further use of the weather data, and we'll talk about a few of them, but there are way more than I could ever talk about in a short time that we're here this evening. Let's talk a little bit about the hardware. The sensor is a wireless, simple to mount sensor pack housing all of the sensors and the battery, and it's solar charged. Due to this fact, it's extremely low maintenance. And just a note, you should place it or try to place it as best you can in an area that has around at least 4 hours of sunlight per day. If you can do that, then it'll pretty much stay charged up forever. I think the last time I touched mine's been up for 2 years. I took it down once or twice, but it's been up over a year and I haven't touched it. It just works. It charges itself up every day. It can run a couple of weeks on a charge if you were to have cloudy days or a snowstorm or whatnot. So it works very well. And then I think, as I mentioned before, it's got that ultrasonic wind sensor with no moving parts to wear out. The other piece of hardware that comes with the system is the hub. The hub is wirelessly connected to the sensor pack via a proprietary radio link that works on 915 megahertz. It has an approximate 1,000 foot or 300 meter line of sight range. So you just got to place that hub somewhere where it is within about 1,000 feet or less of the actual station itself. And then you connect the hub to home Wi-Fi or any Wi-Fi source for that matter. It doesn't have to be a home Wi-Fi or terrestrial. And then the hub basically collects all the parameters over that proprietary data link, and it relays them through the internet for storage on WeatherFlow's data server. Once it's on the data server, it can be accessed by the user and shared with other services if desired. However, I'd point out that the user can choose to keep the data private if that's what they wish to do. But if you want to share share it with other people, which you can do, or potentially maybe share with another service like Weather Underground. You have to go into the settings and then share them publicly. Fully settable. So here's my first graphic. So I'm showing a graphic right now. It's sort of a photograph of the Tempest that shows basically that it is a sort of a cylindrically shaped device. You know, with toward the top is where there's a haptic sensor that collects rain data. It can collect a rain onset, duration, and intensity, as well as accumulation. By integrating the number of raindrops that strike the upper surface. The sonic wind sensor is in the upper portion of the cylindrical unit. There's also a light sensor that measures, basically it measures one parameter, but it breaks that parameter out into the ambient light level, the UV index, and the solar radiation number. There's a pressure sensor on board that breaks the pressure into raw station pressure as well as sea level adjusted pressure. And you can, in the settings, actually set the height of the device if it's higher than ground level to make sure that that parameter is more accurate. Temperature and humidity are measured and broken out into various things. And then one of the probably more interesting and exotic parts of the sensor is the lightning sensor. So it does have a lightning sensor on board that's able to sense lightning data out to 40 kilometers. That would be 25 miles for us folks that like to use the British units. And that's sort of the Tempest. On my I'm going to switch pages to my next page here, and I'll walk through some of this. So I've got a page of specifications, and I'm not going to go through everything on here. Suffice it to say, I'll walk through the sensors one more time. But this particular page has the range of each parameter, the sampling interval, which I will actually talk about, the accuracy and the resolution. The accuracy and resolution of these sensors are very similar to the resolution that you would find on something like a Davis Vantage Pro 2. So again, I'll just quickly walk through them. We have air temperature, which is sampled once a minute. Relative humidity sampled also once a minute. Barometric pressure sampled once a minute. Most of the parameters are sampled at that rate. The lightning activity is event-based, so if there is lightning, it'll sample what it needs, but it doesn't constantly sample, and that's to sort of to save power. The wind speed and the wind direction, however, are sampled at 3 seconds, which is really nice. So if you have a display up or you're watching the data stream on either the application or the web page, you will see the wind speed and direction update every 3 seconds. Ambient light is measured at once per minute. The UV index and the solar radiation, again, those are all derived from the ambient light sensor, and they're also once per minute. And then the rain rate, rain accumulation, rain duration, and rain intensity are also each measured once per minute. And then the rain start is derived from that data, and it is event-based. With all of these individual sensors, you can actually derive a number of parameters. So there's a number of derived parameters that also are available, and I'll just list them really quickly. Dew point, temperature, the pressure trend that you would normally see, for barrel pressure. Is it rising? Is it steady? Is it falling? Heat index, temperature, wind chill, delta T, which is the difference between the temperature and dew point. Neighborhood rain accumulation, air density, the feels like temperature, vapor pressure, sea level pressure, wet bulb temperature, and the wet bulb globe temperature. So those are all derived parameters that basically, if you have the right equation, you can derive them from the basic sensors. Moving on down. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the setup. Setup, the sensor can be easily mounted on a 1-inch nominal diameter, either what most folks use is a piece of PVC pipe or fence top rail 1 inch. And you can readily attain those at a local hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that, Ace Hardware. Also, if you don't want to do that, the device does come with a separate mount, and you can mount it directly to a flat surface, such as, say, the top of a wooden fence post or something like that. But you get the hardware to either mount it on the 1-inch diameter pipe section, or you screw it into the top of a flat surface. So either way, but they provide you both of those with the kit. The hub should be connected to the home Wi-Fi system or any Wi-Fi that's connected to the internet. Setup typically takes less than 10 minutes to accomplish using either the free Android or iOS application, and that's probably worth mentioning. While you don't have to use the applications to view the data, you do have to have them to initially set up the device. So you're either going to need a phone or a tablet that can run iOS or iPad OS just for that initial setup. And however, I would say that I use the app as my daily driver as well on my Android phone, and it works great. So that's a little bit about the setup. Moving on down, I've got some photos here of my particular setup. I'll try and describe them as best I can. So my setup, I've got 5 feet of 1-inch diameter PVC pipe, and I've got a couple of 1-inch pipe straps. And for those who can actually see my presentation, I've got kind of an inset drawing here where you can see the pipe straps connected. They're basically out on my deck in my backyard right off the kitchen, and they're just connected to the 4x4 post that's part of my elevated deck. I also have a photograph in the top right of this slide that looks at the bird deterrent accessory. So, and this will be interesting to hear. So I know a number of you have Tempest already. I wonder if you knew about the bird deterrent accessory. One of the things that happened when this device first came out that was kind of a little bit of a laugh for us all was, you know how birds are, they tend to perch on things. Well, when a bird perches on top of a Tempest, that happens to be where the haptic sensor is. So when the bird does his little rain dance on top of your Tempest, it registers that there's rain, and it will actually correct this, but that can be kind of annoying. So they created this bird deterrent accessory, and the best way I can describe it is it's like a crown of thorns. It basically is a rubber band device, and it has they're 3 or 4 inch high spikes that kind of tilt inward towards the center of the device, and it deters birds from landing on there. And it actually works pretty well. So I purchased that. I think they're less than $10. So that's about a little bit about how mine's set up. There are a ton of different ways to do this. Mine isn't the only way. In fact, I would say mine may not be the best way, because when the wind blows, my 5-foot section of PVC pipe tends to move around a little bit, and sometimes that confuses the Tempest into thinking that it's raining. It trips the haptic sensor. So if I were to if somebody wanted to have a suggestion, I would say buy a piece of steel or aluminum top rail, which is going to be much stiffer, and utilize that, and they don't cost very much at all. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, you got the station, you got it up, how are you going to access the data? Well, I have a graphic that I'm showing now of the Tempest website forecast page. So the Tempest, if either you use the app or you use the web page, usually it'll come up on the forecast page. So basically what WeatherFlow does is WeatherFlow takes the data from your weather station and it bakes it through some of their algorithms, and they produce a forecast, just for you. And so this particular forecast tells me the temperature, the current temperature, the sky condition. This particular one I'm showing says partly cloudy. It shows a small inset of the wind direction and speed, relative humidity, barometric pressure. It has the feels like temperature and the UV reading as well. And then it has for today, it shows sort of almost a weather underground style that shows each hour what the temperature, humidity, or temperature, precipitation potential, and the wind direction and speed are. And then down below that, it goes out for 6 or 7 days. So that's that. Up in the upper right-hand corner of this display is a little icon that looks like the Tempest sensor itself. And if you, I can't click it here, but if you click that icon in the web page, it takes you to a different display, which I'm going to show next, which is this one. And this is the sensor data display. And basically the sensor data display gives you each parameter that the Tempest records and tells you what it is. So this particular one has the temperature at the top of the page in a sort of a horizontal bar type format. So it's got, this particular one says it's 74.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And then over to the right, it tells you the dew point and the humidity. And up in the upper right corner of that, there's a number. And this particular one says 48 minutes ago. So this particular one, I think the display had gone stale, and it's kind of nice because it tells you that. Normally, when you have it running, it'll just constantly update forever and ever. But once my internet might have dropped out, so it actually warned me that, hey, this is not current data. This was 48 minutes ago data. Then next down the display, there's another horizontal bar with the barometric pressure, and then the trend. This particular one says 30.152 inches of mercury and falling. The next one down has the wind direction and speed. So over on the far left corner, there's sort of a compass rose with a number in it and a little arrow around the outside of the compass rose. That is the 3-second wind reading. And so that little arrow will slide around to whatever the direction the wind is from and change every 3 seconds. And the number will be the wind speed. In my particular case, it's reading 1.8 miles per hour. And it looks like from the west-northwest is the direction. Then to the right of that, there's another couple of numbers, and it has the, well, on my display, 272 degrees at 1.3 miles per hour. That next number is basically the 1 minute average. So it takes and it averages 1 minute of those 3-second readings, and then it displays that there. So if you don't want to sit there and stare at the constantly updating 3-second display, you can just take a quick glance and know that the average wind in the last 1 minute was 272 degrees at 1.3. Over to the right, it gives you the gust factor, and in this particular case, I'm showing 1 to 2 knots of gust wind speed. Below that is the lightning data. So it shows you if lightning is happening right now by the color of, there's a little lightning bolt there, and then it tells you the time, how long it's been since lightning was last detected, in my example 10 days ago, and then what the distance and that last lightning strike was. In this case, it says the distance was between 6 to 8 miles away, and then it has a reading of the number of lightning strikes in the last 3 hours. And that particular one in my example says 0. Of course, that was because the last lightning was 10 days ago. Then the next line below that is the rain sensor. It'll tell you if it's raining, how hard it's raining, how much it's rained. And then over to the right side, it gives you the today rain number and the yesterday rain number in whatever units you've chosen. In my particular case, I have it in inches. And since it's been a while, in my example, my rain says 0.00 yesterday and 0.00 inches today. Below that is the brightness or the light sensor, which tells you if it's daytime or nighttime. It gives you the UV reading per the normal UV scale. In my example, the UV reading is 1.8. And then it has a brightness and a solar radiation number. Again, all of those 3 numbers are derived from the one sensor. So in my particular case, the brightness, which is measured in lux, is 24,995. I can tell you by experience that means it's daytime. And then the solar radiation is 208. What is the W? It's watts per square meter. So again, all those 3 numbers come from the same sensor. And then my particular example, I show the voltage of the weather display. That is not default, but you can set it to come on if you want that on your display. And my particular one is 2.75 volts. And I can tell you from experience, normally the highest it ever gets is 2.77. Goes up in the day, and then when the sun goes down, it goes down a few tenths, and then it goes up and down. But you can look at that. And then it has a state setting. In my particular example, it says the battery state is good. And at the very bottom, at the very bottom of display, it has a 3-day or maybe it's a 4-day, quick forecast that it displays as well. So that's the Tempest website. Now, one of the neat things that you can do with the Tempest is any of those horizontal data representations that are on the sensor page. If you click any one of them, you will select that particular parameter. And I have switched over to what display you get when you click one of them. You get a time history plot of that parameter. And so in this particular case, I have an example of what the temperature time history looks like. And so it has a graph. The y-axis or the left-hand axis is temperature in degrees, and then the lower axis is time. You can adjust the time scale with, there's a plus and minus button on here, and you can drill down to, within maybe an hour or a half hour, you can go out to all the data that you have, which could be months or years. And then you can scroll back and forth. And if you select any point on this map, you can see the individual data points. It will display exactly what point you have selected. So in my particular example, you can see that there is a vertical sort of amber bar over to the left side of the graph. And then the numbers up at the top are telling you that this sample occurred on the 9th of October of this year at 1:55 p.m. And at that time, the temperature was 72.7 degrees Fahrenheit and the dew point was 56.1. So basically that's how that works. And any of the parameters on the sensor data display can be clicked and produce a similar chart, which is really nice. Let's see, moving on to the next page, there's also a station map. So I've got an example I'm showing of the station map that shows all the Tempest stations around the Wichita local area, which is where I live. And then you can actually see this one that's in white for the people who are sighted. This is actually my station up here. We live near a little town called Mays that's on the northwest corner of town. But this map can be zoomed in and out, and boy, if you zoom it out, it just gets full of stations. But any of these stations you can click and see, and anybody who would like to go and look at some Tempest data, all you need to do is do a Google search on Tempest weather map, and it'll direct you to one of these pages, and you can go ahead and look at maybe look at some Tempest stations around your local area. Or if you remember where Wichita is, you can actually go and look at my station data. My station name is Hampton Lakes, Mays, Kansas. And then also you actually get some bonus parameters, which I'm not going to go through on the map data page as well. Moving on down, further on the Tempest apps or the website, there is a station history button that you can select. And I should have said up at the top of the app or the bottom, depending upon if it's running on your phone or your computer, you can select all of these different things. So right now we're on the station history. There's an icon at the top of the page for that. There's an icon for the map, and then there's an icon for the weather, which go back to all of those displays that I had shown. And then if you're in the application, there's actually a settings over a icon as well that you can get into to set your settings if you need to. The history page is quite nice. You can select history by day, week, month, year, or all the data. It's called all time, which is all the data that your station has ever collected. In my particular example, I have years selected and I've got 2022. So I can see, I'm not going to go through all the parameters, but basically it lists all the parameters that the sensor can read, and then it gives you, for whatever you have selected. So in my case, all of 2022's data, my air temperature, the minimum was on the 23rd of February, it looks like, 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit. My maximum was last July on the 19th of July, 107.8 degrees. Yeah, it was a real scorcher that day. And then the average temperature for the year of 2022 thus far is 62.1. And again, all of those parameters aggregate down to depending upon what you've selected there. Okay, so that's a little bit about, that's sort of the user experience that you would have, notwithstanding what Mark's going to talk about for the applications, and that's what you get for the price of admission. You don't have to pay any extra fees once you buy the sensor. You get all of that for free. They host the data for free. It doesn't cost you anything. Okay, let's talk about the applications. So there are Android and iOS applications both. They can be downloaded on Google Play or the App Store if you're an Apple type individual. They are both free applications. And however, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. You need at least one of these apps to complete the initial setup of the device. Once the setup is complete, the data can be accessed through any connected web browser or the application. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other options for accessing the data, right? It's pretty feature-rich set of data access just with what the Tempest gives you out of the box. But some people, like us engineers, we need more. We got to have more power. So we'll talk about this first one, which is called PyConsole. This is an app that runs on a Raspberry Pi. In fact, I think PyConsole will probably run on just about any version of Linux. But most people run this on a Raspberry Pi, and it's a free open source app, and it's designed to be used for a dedicated display. One of the things that the Tempest doesn't come with is a dedicated display. Some people have made a lot of that. Some people have suggested maybe Weatherflow should create one, and they talked about it. I don't know if they're still thinking about that or not, but there are a number of ways you can do it, and this is an easy one. So basically, I have an example of the display, and it's basically aggregating all the data plus a little bit more from the sensors there. And what I'll do at the end here is I'll do a little live demonstration of looking at the data right off of mine. But if you can see, it's a little bit busy to describe in detail, but if you can imagine sort of a rectangular display that can be sized, by the way, and it has different blocks, and one block is the forecast data, which pulls your current temperature and rainfall numbers, but also provides you a quick forecast. There's a temperature block that gives you a little bit more data depth than what the Tempest does. So it gives you the actual temperature, it gives you the days, high and low temperatures, and the times that those occurred today. It gives you the feels like temperature and an icon that goes along with that can be calibrated. It gives you the humidity and dew point. It also has a wind section that gives you a little bit more depth of data than the Tempest application does. There is a very detailed lightning display that breaks out into a lot more detail. The lightning strikes, it gives you the last 3 hours, it gives you everything today. It gives you the lightning strike frequency, but a 10-minute frequency and a 3-hour frequency, and it gives you how many strikes have occurred during the last month and the last year. And in my example, it looks like I've had 120,100 nominally lightning strikes this year so far is what it's telling me. Let's see. And then there's the solar index. It also tells you, it kind of gives you a representation of where the sun is, how long it is till sunset, or if it's nighttime, how long it is until sunrise. And then there's a breakout of the rainfall. And there's some other screens that you can configure on this particular one for a more involved forecast. And then there's actually there's the solar page that I just talked about that breaks out the solar parameters, but there's also a moon page that breaks out the phases of the moon if you want to do that. And the lightning panel can actually be replaced with a pressure panel that gives a lot more detail on the barometric pressure. So that's PyConsole. Excuse me. That's PyConsole. Okay, the next one is WeWeather. WeWeather, the program itself is WEEWX, pronounced WeWeather. It's a free open source application that runs on a Raspberry Pi and actually other versions of Linux as well. And I think it runs on a number of platforms. Most folks use it on a Raspberry Pi. It captures Tempest data, or for that matter, many other weather stations data as they come across your local network. It stores it in a database, and then it creates custom web pages via an Apache server at 1 minute intervals of all of that data. The web pages have textual data as well as data plots, and I've got some examples here that show data for various time periods. So you can actually configure this page and click right on it, and you can see a day's data, a week, a month, a year, etc. Also, very interestingly, as an accessible feature, WeWeather produces climate summary pages in the same exact format as NOAA does. So I don't know, I'm sure for those of you out there who are weather enthusiasts, you've probably run across the NOAA climatic summary pages. And so you can produce daily, monthly, weekly, yearly climate summaries. And basically what this system does is it creates all those pages automatically, and then you can access them. And it basically is just taking the data that the WeWeather database is pulling off of your network and storing for you, and then it just reformats it into a different way. So that's what WeWeather does. It's actually pretty involved, but I've got it running, and it works very well. Once I got up and running, I didn't have to mess around with it too much. So that's WeWeather. Here is on my next page, I'll try and describe this as best I can. This is a static web page that's produced. It produces this, I think it's either every 1 minute or every 5 minutes, I can't recall. But what it basically, it produces this web page whether you want it or not. And so it just sits out there in memory. And then when it produces a new one, it just overwrites over the old one. So as long as you know the address of where the server is dumping this HTML file, you can just call it up. So in my particular case, it's listing at the top of the web page my station name, Hampton Lakes, Maize, Kansas. It has the date and the time that the data was good for. Down the left panel, it has a bunch of textual data, which basically are all of the parameters that the weather station has: temperature, heat index, wind chill, etc., baro, wind, rain rate, and all of that stuff. It's got a celestial panel that actually gives you phases of the moon and sun and that type of thing, which, is just part of what they produce. And then there's down at, oops, I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll a page that's a static page here. I jumped to the next page. At the bottom of the page, it gives you, you can set it up to show today's numbers and then the weekly, the yearly, the monthly, and you can compare them side by side. Toward the right side in the center of the display, basically it has time history graphs of each parameter. So in this case, the barometric, the outside temperature and dew point, wind chill, heat index, humidity, wind speed with the gust speed, wind direction, wind vector, the rain, the UV index, and radiation. So all of those parameters are out there. And in the history, there's a sort of a selectable button toward the top of the page where you can select if you want to look at a day's worth of data, a week's, a month, a year's. And then over to the right side, upper right side of the web page, there are select drop-down boxes that you can select the monthly reports from. So you can either select a month or a year, and then it'll produce those tabular data charts that I was talking about earlier. And I've got an example here on the next page of what one of those looks like. So as I said, it can produce a bunch of different ones, but this is sort of their NOAA climate summary format page. And the one that I have here showing, it basically says at the top of the page, climatological summary for year 2021. So this is the entire year. It gives the station name, the elevation of the station, the latitude, longitude, and then basically it shows, in this particular case, I was doing 2021. So you'll see it's got a year, month, and then it's got, this particular chart is for temperature. So it looks at the mean and max temperatures, the heating and cooling days, the high, the day, and the low per day, and then maxes and mins, and it collates all of that into, every month it has all of that data. And as I said before, you can produce these daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. It produces them all. It's just taking your data that it's stored in that database and chunk it into a really nice format. The note here, though, on this particular one is we have proven, Joel has helped me to prove that this format can be read by a screen reader. So we figure that may be very useful accessibility feature. So that's weather. And then sort of for my final example of deep dive in your weather data, we'll talk about weather plus the Weather 34 dynamic web page. This web page provides dynamic data with the 3-second wind updates and a great number of ways that aggregate to aggregate your data and links to other useful weather related information. For instance, you can have this thing plot up the current epicenter of the latest earthquake that happened, and there's a bunch of other things that you can customize in here. All of that to say there's a lot going on here. I'm going to do a dynamic, show you what this page looks like real time because it's kind of hard to describe without seeing it go. I'll just say this, it's a much more refined and beautiful way to look at the data that the Tempest produces. Don't get me wrong, the Tempest pages and what the app puts out are very nice. They're simple, they're easy to read, the numbers are large, they get the job done, but sometimes you want something with a little bit more glitz, and that's what this is. So running weather and having this is a beautiful, and I'll show you what I mean in a second, because you can click on different things and produce almanacs, yearly, monthly, weekly, etc. Off of this data and a number of other things. So these are all different things, and I'm only scratching the surface of other things that you could do with this weather station with the external data. Okay, let's talk about accessibility, and I'll come back right at the end and I'll do a quick demo of a couple of these pages to show you what I'm talking about for the people who are sighted. I'll try and describe it, but that's basically what they do. Accessibility, so this is important. The Tempest has direct integrations with some of the most popular third-party services, including Weather Underground, IFTTT, Google Home, Amazon Alexa, Siri, and SmartThings. So I know most of you tech geeks like me have probably run into one or two of those in your tech world, and this system is integrated with all of them. You can learn more about third-party integration applications on the, I've got a link to the forum. It's called the Tempest Weather System Third-Party Applications and Developers Forum. You could find this probably by doing a Google search. I do have it linked in here. So let's see if I mouse over this thing, will it show? So I'm going to read this out, but it may be a little bit tedious. But for those who can see, it's https community.weatherflow.com/Tempest Weather System Third Party Applications. Probably easier to look for that address in Google, but you can also find it on the Tempest website as well. And this is there. If you want to deep dive what can be done with this device, this is the place to go. And I got a massive amount of help on this website by folks both setting up the weather and the Weather 32 and the Pi console. A lot of help, very helpful folks. They're all weather geeks just like me. There are also, maybe more importantly, the WeatherFlow has a collection of self-service APIs and documentation that make it easier for developers, of which I am not one, to build apps and integrations that access data on behalf of the Tempest. They use remote access via REST and WebSockets, and local access via Bluetooth Low Energy and UDP broadcast. So as an example, I believe weather and Pi console use the UDP broadcast, which is basically the format that gets used as that Tempest data comes on their proprietary data link, telemetry link over to the hub, and the hub puts it out as a UDP broadcast. So anything out there that can sniff for UDP can go ahead and pick up that data and do different things. Okay, how to purchase it. If you want to purchase this, you can go to the WeatherFlow shop webpage. The address is http shop.weatherflow.com. As I said before, the current price of the unit in October 2022 dollars is $329. I believe you can search for and find out there somewhere. Was a last week anyway was a 10% off coupon, so you could probably knock some some dollars off of that if you're interested in buying one. Help and resources. The Tempest Community Forum is a great resource for anything from questions on sensor specs to third-party integrations to how to mount and place the Tempest. There are specific areas on that forum for owners and separate areas for developers. So, and it's ripe with information. Again, this is where I learned everything I needed. And lots of great info, as I said before, to set up if you're interested in either PyConsole, WeWeather, Weather34, or any of these other integrations. There are a ton of folks out there to help you get sorted out. The address of the community forum is community.weatherflow.com. And again, that can be found on the Weatherflow website or the Tempest website. Summary. The Tempest, it's a great value proposition. It gives a lot of features that only professional weather stations have at a small fraction of the price. A Davis Weatherflow, as I said before, something like that, you're probably looking at $1,000 or more. A lot of setup versus a little bit over 300 or maybe a little bit less if you find it on sale. Extremely easy to set up. No moving parts to wear out. The data can be accessed from anywhere with an internet connection via any web browser or either of the Android or iOS apps. Stores its data in the cloud for free, allowing a variety of access methods and formats. And maybe most importantly, it's accessible for the visually impaired. And there's a lot of open source options for further use of the weather data. Okay, so before we get to Mark here, I'm going to just spend a couple of quick minutes here and show you. I'm going to fly this in here. Okay, so this is, I am now showing my Tempest live feed on the page. So again, here's all of this stuff that we were talking about, and you can see in the third block down in the wind block, this is the wind block that I'm showing with my cursor here. This number right here, every 3 seconds it's changing, 1.7 miles per hour, 1.6 miles per hour. It should change again here in a second, hopefully. 1.8, and then this little triangle here is the wind direction. The wind direction isn't changing. Then this number here, 296, you saw that bar graph just changed just ever so slightly. So this is the 1 minute average, and we're gusting 1 to 2. A demonstration of if I click on any one of these. So I'm going to click on the temperature, and there you go. I have now got the map or the time history of temperature. And you can see I'm showing data from 5:30 p.m. all the way out to now, which is almost between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. Oh, it's 8 o'clock now. Boy, I'm really using up the time. And then if I mouse over these, the data for each individual data point is changing. And as I said before, I can zoom in on this data like this and see it a lot tighter in, or I can zoom out on the data, and I'm going to zoom out a couple of times. And here we go, I've zoomed way out. Now I'm looking at everything from October. So you can zoom in and out on this data, and then you can look at it however you want. Click on the X at the top of the page, and then you go back to the representation there. The time history, we talked about this, so I'm just going to click through them. There's your history. You can select different time slots, day, week, month, year, everything. So I've selected the history page on mine. I'm showing all time. So my all-time low temperature was 14.1 degrees below zero. My maximum temperature 107.8, which was this summer, etc. You can see, I think Mark asked this a couple of weeks ago, what was the maximum wind? So my maximum wind mark for you was 76.9 miles per hour, and that was recorded on May 15, 2021. Then the map page gives you the map. We kind of talked about all of that. And then the settings gives you the settings, which you can set all of the various things. Probably worth also noting that in the application, you can set up notifications for rain and various things like that, lightning, and it'll send a notification to your phone. So that's the Tempest weather. And I guess I didn't show, okay, here was the display that we showed before with the forecast data, which gives you the current and then the forecast, and then down below It has all the blocks with the day by day, which each one, if you click on any day, it blows that up and gives you more detailed data. Very similar to what Weather Underground does. So that's that one. I'm going to fly that back out of there, and we're going to look at, let's see here. Get rid of that guy. We'll fly in really quick for a quick minute. This is the Weather 34 webpage. So this is taking the aggregated data out of the WeWeather for the long-term stuff. And you can see in here, the wind direction is changing every 3 seconds. So this is actually picking up the UDP data, and it gives you a little bit more information here for temperature and winds. And I'm not going to go through this just to say this aggregates your data. But what I will show you is you can select Almanac. I'm going to select the Almanac for temperature, and it does a pop-up. And now it's giving me the temperature details of what was the high temperature today, which was 68.7 at 4:35 p.m. The dew point max, the dew point minimum, and the times for those today. It has the temperature yesterday factors. 75.2 was the high yesterday. It occurred at 17:22 hours local time, and the low was 53.6 at 6:17 in the morning. And then we've got some other stuff, temperature min and max for the year, for all time, etc. So these are the types of things that you can do. I'm going to show this one really quick because I think it's neat. This is called a windrows representation, and you can select for wind speed and wind gust. Basically, it gives you a compass rose that gives you the statistical analysis of the wind data that it has stored. And I can select 1 hour, I can select 24 hours. So for instance, if I select 24 hours here, it is telling me that the predominance of wind was out of the west, northwest here. And if I mouse over these values, it tells me actually what percent and what the speed was at that time, etc. You can actually set this thing to real time and sit here and watch that data rows sit here and update every 3 seconds as the data is aggregating into it. There it goes. It's changing a little bit. So pretty impressive way to display your data. Maybe not so good for the visually disadvantaged, but for those of you who like to dive down into the visuals, that's what this does. So that's about all I'm going to show there. And then I will quickly show you, I'm going to show you where is it? Okay. This is a representation of the what WeWeather puts out. So this was the slide that I had earlier. That was the basic web page that you can see. So this is using live data right now. It says the date 10/13 and the time that this data was recorded. I think this data may be a little bit stale, but all the charts and graphs are all on here. If I select week, you can see down below at the bottom of the right-hand column, you've got today's numbers and then the weekly numbers that you can compare, and then you can select that to month. It'll change to month, and then the graphs are all updating with that data. The monthly reports, which we looked at earlier, these are the tabular charts that can be read by the screen reader. If I select here the drop down for month, and I'll select let's do September, last month, 22 September. And there it is. It popped up the table, monthly climatological survey for September 2022. And here's your day by day times, averages, heating and cooling days, average wind speed, all of that. And it produces all of that data. You can do the same thing for a year. If I select a year, it gives you a lot more data. So it gives you a temperature chart, a precipitation chart, a wind speed chart. So it breaks everything down. And then, as I said, these things can be read by a screen reader. And let's see what else. And then the other thing, I'm going to minimize that and show you PyConsole. This is PyConsole. So again, PyConsole, it just has a bunch of panels that show the data in a different way. This is what you would use, say, if you wanted to purchase a dedicated Raspberry Pi display and make yourself a console display. And all this does, it doesn't store anything. It just displays the data that's coming across the UDP. And basically, so you can see the wind is updating here every 3 seconds and whatnot. So that's it. That's sort of the end of my demo, and we're gonna move on to Mark. So next up, we've got Mark Lemons. WB6BJN is going to give a little bit of a chat about his setup and his use experience as a new Tempest owner. And Mark, I'm gonna go put my my voice on mute here, and I'm gonna let you give your spiel here. So Mark, pleased to introduce Mark Lemons.
Hey, Mark, before you pick it up, I just want to let everybody know that the link that Alan mentioned, I excuse me, I posted it in the chat. A big long link.
You should be unmuted.
Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Mark.
also wanted to let you know that I posted that big long link that Alan mentioned. I posted that in the chat.
Thank you so much for doing that. And Mark, are you with us?
You asked Margaret to unmute, so you might have messed up and got me instead of Mark.
Okay, Mark's audio shows
Oh, it says
unmute.
it's unmuted.
I wonder if you
I
hit
wonder
the,
if you forgot to tap the
okay.
button that acknowledges it's being recorded. There's one.
I think Mark may be double muted. Mark, can you try and unmute your device just manually?
Alt A.
Or if you're on
There
the
we go.
phone. Ah,
Can you hear us now, Mark?
Well,
or if you're doing it on the phone, it's lower left-hand corner of the
he's
screen.
not on the phone. He's
He's on a
Is
computer.
it on a computer?
Try and unmute yourself one more time, Mark.
Or you can hold the space bar down.
I think he didn't acknowledge, he probably didn't acknowledge the being recorded thing. You got to do that before you can
Oh,
even unmute.
yeah. That's a good point. Mark, it looks like your microphone is open. Can you give us some audio?
It says it's unmuted.
Yeah, it looks unmuted on the participants page.
Maybe rejoin the meeting.
Still going to have to acknowledge
Would-
that recorded message.
Yeah, that may be it, Joel. His mic is showing unmuted right now.
Hope he doesn't have to do what I did. I had to reboot last time that happened to me.
While he's trying to figure that out, do you want me to try to give some comments?
Yeah, that's fine, Margaret. Why don't you do that? And Mark, why don't I suggest you leave the meeting and come back in and see if that resets your microphone. If you're hearing me. There he goes. Okay, go ahead, Margaret. You take it for a few minutes here while we let Mark reset. Thank you.
Well, for those who have iPhones and iDevices, the Tempest is very easy to install. It's in the App Store, and once you get your weather station up, you plug in the Wi-Fi box, and then you install the app, and then you put everything together, and it sees the hub, and it basically, there's very little to it to connect it all together, and all of the data is very user friendly, and so that when you tap on something, and as Alan had all the different results when he went into the different histories, and he went into the different files for the different histories for the wind, the temperature, the pressure, all of that data is all readable by voiceover, and it's all subdivided enough with the clicks that you can tell which data is which, so it doesn't lump itself together and get you confused. You can actually go through it by flicking right and flicking left, and actually parse that data in your mind as you're hearing that data. It's also very easy to go into the Alexa app. Oops, sorry guys. Go into the A device app and have it connect and give you a full report, which I can do right now. Alexa, ask weather flow for a report.
Here is your report for Marg_Dartmouth. It is 63 degrees Fahrenheit with a relative humidity of 100%. The pressure is 29.92 inches of mercury and steady. The winds are north-northeast at 2 miles per hour and gusting up to 4 miles per hour. Currently, there is moderate rain. So far today, it has rained 1.12 inches. The last lightning strike detected was 8 days ago and 21 to 24 miles away. Expect rain today with a high of 67 degrees and a low of 54 degrees.
Okay. All right. So that's what you get from. That's what you get from the A device. You can also hook it to Siri, and I actually have it displayed on my watch. So all of the data you heard on the weather on the A device is on my watch as well.
Thursday, October 13. Current temperature 63 masculine ordinal degrees, low 52 degrees, high 66 degrees, 79%. Local temperature is 63 degrees, high 67 degrees, low 57 degrees.
Yeah, it's probably not coming out very well, and it's probably fast, but so we'll see if Mark is with us.
It looks like Mark is back, but he is not unmuted at the present time.
Okay. Let's see what else can I
Right now he's muted.
you can also ask it questions about how much rain have I had yesterday. You can ask it you can ask the A device what the temperature is. You can ask it what any of the variables are, and the A device will come right back and give you that information. I'm not sure about highs and lows, but it probably does that too.
Just something else to try here. Mark, if you can hear us, can you press and hold your space bar and then talk and see if we hear you that way?
Still don't think he's tabbed around and agreed to the
Yeah, and
recording.
he's still showing muted right now.
Yeah. Anybody catch him on the radio? I don't have one handed.
I can try.
Let's see what else. The app is just tremendously accessible. And I don't know whether they went to great extremes to do this or whether it just happened that way, but everything is parsed so well that you don't have any trouble understanding what the values are.
Makes me want to get one.
Let me see if I can do this. Hang on. I should be able to do this since I'm using my A device.
One notification. WPRI weather. 1 hour ago. W1.
Open Tempest.
Tempest. Button. Credit card. Loan to weather. Raw metal.
I don't know what that was. I have my image descriptions on, so I can flick across.
Mark underscore Dartmouth.
That's my Mark underscore Dartmouth. That's the name of my weather station.
Night sky. Raw metal. Spotlight. Tempest number. Button. 63 degrees. Feels like 63 degrees.
And all I'm doing is flicking right.
Heavy rain.
Heavy rain.
100% humidity. 29.92 in HG. None.
No, I don't know what the none is. Mark has these memorized.
W2 miles per hour.
I know that's the wind.
0 of. 1.14 in today.
That's my rain, 1.14 inches.
Down arrow 52 degrees. Up arrow 66 degrees. Today, rain likely. 6:53 a.m. 6:05 p.m. 10 p.m. 64 degrees. 18. 11 p.m. 64 degrees. 18. 12 a.m. 65 degrees. 18. 1 a.m. 65 degrees. 18. 2 a.m. 64 degrees. 18. 3 a.m. 64 degrees. 20. 4 a.m. 64 degrees. 20. 5 a.m. 64 degrees. 20. 6 a.m. 64 degrees. 22. 7 a.m. 64 degrees. 18.
And what were the 18s and 20s?
I remember I asked Mark that question and I remember we figured it out, but I cannot remember what it was. I'm so sorry.
Data overload.
It was
Maybe
what?
Alan could tell us.
Let me look at my Tempest page here. I
Maybe
think it's
see my-
probably wind direction or probability of precipitation, because all you're basically reading off of that sort of
Right.
forecast thing. So let's see. Let me
1.4
back up. Let me back up this presentation to that
arrow
page.
degrees. Up arrow 66 degrees. Today, rain likely. 6:53 a.m. 6:05 p.m. 10 p.m. 64 degrees. 18. 11 p.m. 64 degrees. 18. 12 a.m. 65 degrees. 18. 1 a.m. 65 degrees. 18. 2 a.m. 64 degrees. 18.
It
3
had
a.m.
to do with
64
something
degrees.
of a
20. 4 a.m.
picture
64 degrees.
because
20.
somebody
5 a.m.
saw it,
64
whether
degrees.
it was
20. 6
it
a.m.
Beth
64
Ann that
degrees.
saw
22.
it? No.
7 a.m. 64 degrees. 18.
Was it? No, it was Johnny's wife looked at it and told us what it was.
Yeah, so I've got I'm showing the display that I think that you've got the reader reading here. And so it has the time, it has an icon that is the weather icon. It's got the temperature, it's got the probability of precipitation, and it has the
Oh,
wind
that's it.
direction. I think
That's
that's
it.
what it's reading those things down. So for the sighted people that can see the display I have up right now, I think that's what it's doing, Margaret.
And then it also is giving you, but you have to catch it, the sunrise and sunset
And
was in
yeah,
there as well.
yep, it's up at the top here. Right, I'm showing it with my cursor for those who can see. Here's the sunrise and then here's the sunset. And then you must have the display where your first day is expanded with all of those numbers, and then it was reading the rain possible. It was reading the short forecast on the lines below that.
I think she's using her phone.
Yes,
Alan.
I'm using my
Yeah,
phone.
yeah. So that's exactly what you heard there.
And then we've got
Down arrow 54 degrees. Up arrow 67 degrees. Friday 14. Rain likely. Down arrow 48 degrees. Up arrow 66 degrees. Sat 15. Clear. Down arrow 54 degrees. Up arrow 66 degrees. Sun 16. Rain possible. Down arrow 48 degrees. Up arrow 61 degrees. Mon 17. Rain likely. Down arrow 46 degrees. Up arrow 57 degrees. Tuesday 18. Rain likely. Down arrow 43 degrees. Up arrow 55 degrees. Web 19. Rain possible. Down arrow 41 degrees. Up arrow 55 degrees. Thursday 20. Clear. Down arrow 46 degrees. Up arrow 59 degrees. Friday 21. Rain possible.
I mean, we're already a week out.
Down arrow 50 degrees. Arrow 61 degrees. Sat 22. Rain possible. 003. Unlock. Unpronounceable. Medium black circle. Tab bar. Selected. Weather. Tab. One of history.
Okay,
Tab.
what's with 003?
3 of 3.
What's what?
What was the 003, I wonder?
History. Selected. Weather. Tab.
Oh,
1 of 3.
shit, don't bump my feet.
Oh, you're on the history page.
Black circle. Unlock. 003.
Yeah, that one.
So it's probably percent of the rain.
I don't.
Hang on, Shay's biting my feet.
Shay, not now.
Yeah, there's Shay.
Or I'll send Phoebe after you.
Yeah, please. Get my shoes on real quick. So unfortunately, that's as much as I've done with it. But the nice thing is that you can get it anywhere, and you can through Siri, you can also access it as well.
Oh yeah, there's a variety of different
it-
ways.
But the nice thing is if you have an Apple Watch, it's one of the apps that the Apple Watch saw, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden all the data just appears on my watch.
Well, and they recently this year created widgets. So I'm pretty sure Apple's got something like that, but Android has widgets now as well. So there's some other things that they've done recently. I've got to say that they really have done a good job of continuing to develop the application and some of the capabilities. So I've been impressed with that. So many things that when you're an early adopter, you don't really know what you're buying into, but I've been very pleasantly surprised at the value for it. Now, what was your experience, Margaret, in setting it up? How long would you say it took you to set the device up?
It probably took me about 10 minutes. I mean, it wasn't mounted, but I put the weather station out on my porch, and I put the hub right on my end table, and I downloaded the app and hooked it all up, and it you go look for the Wi-Fi, and you see it, and you connect it, and it just works.
Here's a real crazy question. It uses a 950 megahertz link. Wonder what it would be like if you had two of them next door to each other, if one would find the other one by mistake.
I really don't know.
Oh, you mean
that's
like
a
if
great
you were
question. Would
in
they
your-
interfere with one another?
Like, say, Steve, if you're in an apartment and you and Don were in the same building and you both had one?
Yes.
I don't know. That's a great question to ask on the users forum. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's come up. Well, I'm kind of thinking that in the interest of time, and the rest of you all can let me know what you think. I'm thinking that maybe we might want to do a follow-up podcast with Mark on a different occasion, and maybe have it be, follow this one, and he can give the presentation that he was going to give to us. So, you guys, would that be okay?
Okay by me.
Yeah, because
I got Mark on the
unfortunately-
phone and we're not being able to get him on.
Right. So I'm
Tell
thinking,
him to-
Joel, that
I just made him a co-host. Tell him to try and unmute again.
He's been in Zoom meetings with us before, so he knows how to do it.
Well, he was here earlier, right?
I think it's just-
We were talking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, he spoke earlier.
it's one of those things that technology betrays us at the worst time. So
Yep, it knows.
Well,
it's not
I was-
user error or anything like that. It's just, it happens, and it happens to the best of us at the worst time. So I'm
I
thinking
was
that
glad
maybe
to
that's
be
what,
able to fill in.
yeah, thank you, Margaret. I really appreciate that you were able to step in
I
and provide
couldn't
those
do
details.
him justice. I know he's got more information.
I got a question for Angelo. He says, Angelo, when he hits Alt A, it says the host will not allow him to unmute.
Oh,
Yeah, that's because he didn't hit the tab key over to select OK after the record started.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna probably have to stop
So
recording.
again, I think this is what the best thing to do is just to wrap this up here and maybe do a follow-up podcast with Mark where we can have him give his presentation, and that way his information will get out there and it'll be helpful to everybody. So again, Alan, thank you for coming on and sharing this with us. This is very information packed, feature rich, and just makes my envy grow. And I want one of these things. I just wish I didn't live in an apartment and had a place to set one up and use it the right way. But who knows, maybe for the future. So yeah, great presentation, guys. Really good
Thank
stuff.
you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it, and great group of folks, and